Texas has taken a bit of a hit when it comes to who they have played because of the teams on their schedule. Some have been underperforming. Some of them have just not been very good at all. A lot of them have really struggled on offense. And yet, Texas, the number one defense in America, maybe they have something to do with that. But I did see this number when it comes to wins against teams inside who are bowl eligible. They have more wins against teams bowl eligible than anybody else in college football. Now, that doesn't mean there's a lot of teams that are like 9-0 and 8-2 or whatever, but they have taken some hits when it comes to their schedule, but they have played a lot of teams. And if you really look at college football, and especially when you see Florida at about 500, Oklahoma 6-5, Nebraska 6-5, USC just went to 6-5 with a win against UCLA. A lot of teams are just around 500. Look at the Big 12 in the midsection. There's a lot of teams that are bowl eligible, but not a lot of them that are 8-3, 9-2. And really, in a way, there's some of that.
8-3, 9-2 teams are all playing for the title.
They're playing for the championship.
So
yeah, exactly right. So they do have teams, not top 25 wins, but wins against teams who are bowl eligible.
Yeah, look, I think that, and it's going to take more than just 1 year, but I think we're starting to see that, there are going to be different standards we have to apply to things. Winning has to mean something. So if you lose 3 games, and even though you might be a better team, well, you know what? If there's a 2-loss team ahead of you that that's earned their way in, then maybe that is. There's got to be different benchmarks. It's about getting the 12 best teams. I think that, you want the 12 best teams, but you also want the 12 best teams that also earned it. Because, the best is in the bottom of the whole.
That's a very, very blurry way to look at it. Not you, but I'm talking about the 12 best teams, because that's still, even then, is very much up for opinion.
Yeah, so, the 12 best teams who get in should also have earned it. So it's that metric, because that's the best, is going to have to be, when it comes down to teams who don't win the conference title, you're going to have to do it, but you have to have earned it. You have to have won games. You can't just, wash away losses because one loss is better than another, because there's always examples across college football that are going to be able to stump it. Look, I'll just give you an example right now. Jack sent this to me earlier. Now, Duke is in no way in playoff contention, correct?
No.
They're no way. You would not say that they're in playoff contention. What is Duke's record?
7-4.
They are 8-3. Okay. Who are Duke's 3 losses to?
Clemson?
No, they haven't played Clemson.
Okay. Miami?
They played Miami. Yes, lost to them. 10-1.
Got to be somebody in the SEC.
No, they're all 3 in conference.
Okay.
They've lost to Miami, who's 10-1, SMU, who's 10-1, Georgia Tech, who's 7-4, and beat Miami, by the way. Alabama's 8-3. Their losses to a 9-2 Tennessee team, a 6-5 Vanderbilt team, and a 6-5 Oklahoma team that until Saturday night, most of the Oklahoma fans didn't want to see any of their faces ever again enter Gaylord Family Stadium because they hated them so much. So, again, it's in the eye of the beholder, but whose resume?
Yeah, but here's what happens, and Craig, please come on in with this, that people look, when you're a name like that, a lot of times, but they do have the win against Georgia. They do have the win against Georgia. How much does that offset losing to mid-level teams with records based like Vanderbilt and Oklahoma?
I mean, I guess it matters a lot. It's a mess. I just think that, the case of Texas, where you started off talking about this, they just haven't played in many exciting games. So you just don't think about them. There's been zero excitement around the actual games themselves outside of Georgia. The Oklahoma game was a total wash. That game mattered not at all. Had very little hype compared to what you expected it might have going into it, because Oklahoma started off so poorly. So for Texas, it's not their fault they played an easy schedule. It's not their fault Michigan stinks compared to what you thought that they would be, or that Oklahoma was the same way. Vanderbilt, that's one of their biggest games this year, but A&M's top 15, so they'll have a big win or they'll have a loss that sends them the opposite direction after this weekend. I'm just I get all the conversation around the comparisons and all that, but it's just so messy, and it just matters who you're talking to, because there are people who just aren't as smart as other people, and there are people who are very biased, and there are people just have their different ways of thinking, and it's frustrating for me to try to have conversations with people who just say, well, South Carolina would beat Iowa State, and therefore, like those types of things. So, I don't know. I think Texas has done, for example, if you want to just focus on them, everything they should do up until this point. You lost to Georgia, got beat up pretty good, but outside of that, you've handled the schedule in front of you. And you know what? Maybe it's not good enough for Jim or Tim or whoever's got a hot opinion on Texas' schedule right now, but if they go beat Texas A&M and they go win the SEC championship game,
enough said.
Then you can shut the F up.
Yeah.
And that's the part about this all that drives me insane, is that we're doing this every week, and I get why. Like, that's the whole point of college football fandom. But for me, just the way I think, I'm just like, let it play out. Like, I just don't have the energy to argue with you and get hardcore arguments about something that could change in 3 days. You know what I mean? And that's what it was like with, BYU with the start of the playoff rankings. It's like, hey, these first rankings, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. But, yeah, as you go along, they get more important. And everybody's flipping out about where BYU's ranked. Where are they now?
Oh, they're down.
Like, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah,
So,
no,
you got to play the games in front of you. So, Texas' schedule.
Same thing with Indiana.
Yeah, Texas' schedule's not maybe what you think it should be cracked up to be, but that is not in their control. They've technically played 4 and are about to play their 5th top 25 team, if you want to use the at the time they played them metric. So, yeah, I get the cases being made, but Texas is like way back in the line of the cases to make about trying to knock people. Like they're like 20th in line for that conversation.
I think what we've become, and I don't know if it's just in sports, we now argue about the person who's also a part of the conversation and what they're not good at or what's wrong with them or they have warts. And it's kind of like that now. I don't know, maybe it's been like that for 100 years, but it just seems like whenever there's a conversation of 3, 4, 5 teams, we spend a lot of time on what's wrong with somebody rather than the fact that they have a schedule, and I'm not propping them up. Michigan, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida, Arkansas, and I know Florida and Arkansas have not been all that great of late, and A&M, who's their longtime rival, despite the fact they haven't played since 2011. That's pretty salty.
The style points argument, collapses in on itself for all but like one team a year. Like, there's going to be one team. Well, actually, now it doesn't look like who's got a perfect, like, every game looks great. Oregon's number one. They've been the best team for the last couple months, and they were already ranked high. But do they have a schedule that you could make a hot girl calendar out of and go like, man, I don't know if I love Miss December or Miss October more? No, you don't. Because, again, we go back to parity. Everybody has them. So you like to go like, oh, well, this team, they won the game. Did they win the game? Just focus on that. They only beat this team that's not very good. Like, there's going to be people out there who, should Oregon lose in the Big Ten title game, which doesn't matter because they'll be in, but should Oregon lose, there's going to be people say, well, yeah, I mean, they only beat Wisconsin by 3. Well, yeah, everybody has crap days, man. Everybody does. Yep. And the great teams are the ones who win on their crap days.
Well, and there are, exactly.
I just think there's better arguments to make than worry about Texas' schedule. Yeah. There's a lot of other teams that are farther down that are, the Indianas of the world that you can have that conversation about.
My comparison was about Alabama.
Yeah, I'm just talking in general. I'm not even talking about what you just said, but I'm just saying, like, in general, like, you can pick apart a lot of schedules, but Texas is not where I would start or even be top of mind whatsoever. They're where they are. Now, if you want to go debate Boise State or Indiana or whoever, they're at the tail end, that's fine. But just for me personally, and I know it's not the most, again, I'll say it like it's like the nobody cares about Houston's offseason plans, right? I know that nobody cares except for me and a few other people. But like
Willie Fritz does, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't care about the Twitter arguments. I just don't care. I don't care because it's going to change on Friday and Saturday anyways. Like Tennessee last week was like, this is bull, this is blah, 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 we're getting left out. You're number 7 this week. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so all that was for nothing, really. So I just don't get caught up in all that social media back and forth. I let the games speak for themselves. I know that that's taking away a ton of what college football fandom, especially online, is, because so much of it is the throwing, salvos at the other conferences, the other teams. I personally don't get caught up in that. I'm more of a let it play out. It played out for Tennessee last week. It played out for some others last week. And it didn't play out, in the case of a Colorado and teams like that. So who knows what is in store this week, but it's all set up for a lot of calamity, a lot of chaos, and a lot of bickering and a lot of mudslinging, and that is college football's essence. So we are where we're supposed to be, and this expanded playoff has definitely, I think, if anything, just ratcheted things up a couple of notches.
I just think that because it was one of the most intense games, and Georgia jumped into Texas's business with the defense forcing short fields and scoring, and then that UT made the run kind of like they did against Washington. That was one of the most intense games and got real close of being 31-6. Yeah. But in the end, Georgia had to go, 90 yards and convert a third and long, and eventually won the game. Play again. Let's see what happens. And hell, they might even play yet again down the road if they end up playing in the SEC championship game. It would be a huge deal for A&M. It really would be amazing because of what all this means, the convergence of the new schools into the SEC, and because they tease the hell out of people. Their fan base, they tease them so much. And had that game with Auburn down 21-0 and then have a chance on a flea flicker to win the game with a catch, game's over. And they couldn't do it. All right, now a couple
torture.
Yeah,
that was so Texas A&M. I mean, in some way. I mean, it wasn't the biggest loss. If they had done that against Texas, that would have been so Texas A&M. Would be to lose that type of a game. So not necessarily to Auburn, but yeah, to let some of the air out of the balloon right before what would be this. I mean, it's going to be a mega matchup anyways, but really you did take some of the air out of it. It's still a big, big, big deal for the people involved, and I think the country will take notice of that as well. But, yeah, how could you just not win that game and really have it at full max power? Instead, you stumble against Auburn, but oh well.
Yeah, and then if they win that game, there is still a slight chance because of, again, what happened in front of them, that they could play Texas and lose in a shootout, let's say 30-27 or whatever the score might be, hell, maybe 8-6. And you could still be up for consideration when they go to the 12 teams. All right.